My daughter was always busy with work until the news announced my $22 million jackpot. Then she remembered my number. But by then, it was already too late. I had already learned the difference between being alone and being abandoned. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Margaret, and I'm 73 years old. For the last 15 years, I lived in a cramped studio apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where the radiator clanged like an angry ghost every winter morning. The walls were painted that institutional beige color that screams temporary, even though nothing about my life there felt temporary anymore. It felt permanent in the most suffocating way possible. Every morning, I would wake up to the sound of garbage trucks rumbling down Broadway at 5:30, their hydraulic wheezing mixing with car horns and sirens, the symphony of a city that never stops moving, never stops demanding, never stops taking. I'd shuffle to my tiny kitchenette in my worn terry cloth slippers, the ones with holes in the toes that I kept promising myself I'd replace but never did. The linoleum floor was always cold, even in summer, and it creaked under my weight like it was tired of holding me up. I'd make instant coffee in a chipped mug that read, "World's Greatest Mom," a Mother's Day gift from my daughter Jessica when she was 12. The irony wasn't lost on me, not anymore. The coffee always tasted bitter, no matter how much sugar I added, but I drank it anyway because it was part of my routine, part of the small rituals that kept me tethered to something resembling a normal life. From my single window, I could see a sliver of the Hudson River between two towering apartment buildings. Sometimes I'd stand there for an hour, watching joggers and dog walkers move along the riverside path, wondering what it felt like to have somewhere important to go, someone important waiting for you. The contrast was stark. Outside, life pulsed with purpose and motion, while inside my four walls, time seemed to crawl like thick honey. Sweet at first, but eventually making you sick. That particular Tuesday in November started like every other day, except for one thing. I had decided after weeks of staring at my phone to text Jessica about Thanksgiving. My fingers trembled as I typed the message. At 73, you'd think I'd be past the point of feeling nervous about reaching out to my own daughter, but there I was, rewriting a simple invitation 3 times before hitting send. "Hi, honey. I know you're incredibly busy with work, but I was wondering if you might be free for Thanksgiving dinner. I could cook your favorite, the stuffed turkey with sage dressing like Grandma used to make. I haven't seen you since your birthday in August. I miss you terribly. Love, Mom." I sent it at 8:15 in the morning. By 8:16, I could see the little notification that she'd read it. And then, nothing. The silence that followed felt heavier than the November rain that had started pattering against my window. I spent the rest of that day checking my phone every few minutes, the way you might check a wound to see if it was still bleeding. By evening, the screen showed, read 8:16 a.m. and nothing more. No response, no acknowledgement, no sign that my words had meant anything at all to the person I had loved more than life itself for 35 years. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I pulled out the old photo albums I kept in a cardboard box under my bed. The box smelled like mothballs and faded memories, that particular scent of things that have been stored away too long. I opened the first album with hands that shook not from age, but from the weight of everything those pictures represented. There she was at age 3, gap-toothed and grinning, covered in chocolate cake from her birthday party in our old apartment in Brooklyn. I could almost smell the Johnson's baby shampoo I used to wash her hair with, could almost feel the weight of her small body curled against mine during bedtime stories. In another photo, she was 7, missing her front teeth, holding up a crayon drawing of the two of us holding hands under a rainbow. "Me and Mommy Forever" was scrawled across the bottom in purple crayon. The pictures told the story of a childhood I had sacrificed everything to create. Jessica at her high school graduation, valedictorian, her face glowing with pride and possibility. Jessica at college, arms around her sorority sisters, looking confident and beautiful, and ready to conquer the world. Jessica at her wedding 5 years ago, a wedding I had paid for by selling my engagement ring, my grandmother's china, and cashing in my small retirement fund. I remembered that conversation with painful clarity. She had called me from her expensive apartment in Midtown, the one she could barely afford even with her marketing job at a prestigious firm. "Mom, I need your help," she had said, and my heart had leaped because it was the first time in months she had called me for anything other than a perfunctory birthday or holiday check-in. "David and I want to have the wedding at the plaza. I know it's expensive, but it's my dream venue. This is my one chance to have the perfect wedding." I had looked around my tiny studio, at the stack of past-due bills on my kitchen counter, at the envelope containing my monthly Social Security check that barely covered rent and groceries. But I had also looked at that gap-toothed little girl in the photographs, and I had said the only thing a mother's heart knows how to say: "Of course, sweetheart, we'll figure it out." Figuring it out had meant selling everything of value I owned. My engagement ring from Jessica's father, a marriage that had ended when she was 10, but the ring had still held sentimental value, went to a pawn shop in Queens for $800. My grandmother's china set, passed down through 3 generations, sold on eBay for $1,200. I had cashed in my small retirement account, paying heavy penalties that reduced $20,000 to barely $15,000. But Jessica had gotten her dream wedding, 200 guests at the Plaza Hotel, a 7-course meal with an open bar, a 12-piece orchestra. She had looked radiant walking down the aisle in a dress that cost more than I spent on food in 6 months. And when she hugged me during the mother-daughter dance, whispering, "Thank you for making this perfect," I had felt like every sacrifice was worth it. That was 5 years ago. Since then, my phone calls went to voicemail. My texts received one-word responses, if any. The invitations to visit her new house in Connecticut, bought with her husband David's investment banking salary, became less frequent and then stopped altogether. When I mentioned feeling lonely or asked if I could visit, she always had the same response. She was busy with work, traveling for business, dealing with stress I wouldn't understand. "You don't know how demanding my job is, Mom," she would say during our increasingly rare conversations. "I'm managing million-dollar campaigns. I can't just drop everything to chat." But she could drop everything to call me when she needed something. When David's car broke down and they needed $3,000 for repairs. When they wanted to take a vacation to Italy but came up short on the funds. When her laptop died and she needed money for a new one immediately because her work couldn't wait. Each time, I found a way. I sold my few remaining pieces of jewelry. I skipped meals to save money. I walked instead of taking the subway, even when my arthritis made every step painful. I enabled this pattern because I loved her, but somewhere deep inside, I was beginning to understand that love and enable weren't the same thing. The realization crept up on me slowly, like the way morning light gradually fills a dark room. You don't notice it at first, but suddenly you can see everything clearly, including things you wish remained hidden. The morning after Thanksgiving, a Thanksgiving I spent alone with a frozen dinner and a bottle of cheap wine, I woke up to find a voicemail on my phone. My heart jumped, thinking it might be Jessica feeling guilty about not responding to my invitation. Instead, it was my landlord. "Mrs. Chen, this is Frank Martinez. Your rent check bounced again. This is the 3rd time in 4 months. I need to talk to you about your lease. Call me back today." I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my nightgown, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not break completely, that would come later, but crack, like ice beginning to give way under too much weight. I had given Jessica $3,000 just 6 weeks earlier when she called crying about unexpected medical bills David had from a minor surgery. I had given her that money out of my rent fund, assuming I could catch up when my next Social Security check arrived. But unexpected expenses, a prescription that Medicare didn't fully cover, a repairman for my broken refrigerator, had left me short. I called Jessica's number with shaking hands. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Her voice bright and professional. "Hi, you've reached Jessica Davidson. I'm either traveling for business or in meetings, but leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can." I hung up without leaving a message. What would I say? That I was facing eviction because I had given her money I couldn't afford to give? That her bounced rent check was just the latest consequence of always putting her needs before my own survival? I tried calling 2 more times that day. Both calls went to voicemail. I sent a text. "Honey, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me back today." The response came 6 hours later. "Busy day. In meetings all week. We'll try to call this weekend. Weekend came and went. No call. The following Monday, I received an eviction notice. 30 days to pay all back rent plus fees, or I would be forced to leave the apartment I had called home for 15 years. I stared at the official document, trying to make the numbers make sense. Between back rent and penalties, I owed almost $4,000. My monthly Social Security check was $1,137. Even if I didn't eat or pay any other bills, it would take me more than 3 months to save that amount. That evening, I did something I hadn't done since Jessica was a teenager. I took the subway to her office building in Midtown. I didn't call ahead, didn't ask permission, didn't give her the chance to tell me she was too busy. I just went. The lobby of her building was all marble and glass, the kind of place where everyone looked important and rushed and expensive. I felt small in my discount store coat and sensible shoes, surrounded by people young enough to be my grandchildren, all of them moving with the kind of confidence that comes from having purpose and paychecks and bright futures stretching ahead. The security guard looked at me suspiciously when I asked to be announced to Jessica Davidson on the 23rd floor. "Is she expecting you?" he asked, his tone suggesting that people like me didn't typically have business with people like her. "I'm her mother," I said, and something in my voice must have convinced him I wasn't a threat. He made a phone call. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but it told me everything I needed to know. "There's a Margaret Chen here to see you. Says she's your mother." "Okay, I'll tell her." He hung up and looked at me with what might have been pity. "I'm sorry, ma'am. She says she's in an important meeting and can't be disturbed. She suggests you call her later to schedule an appointment." An appointment? To see my own daughter. The woman I had carried for 9 months, nursed through childhood illnesses, supported through college heartbreaks, and bankrolled through adult financial crises. I rode the subway home in silence, watching my reflection in the dark windows as the train sped through tunnels beneath the city. The woman staring back at me looked older than 73. Her eyes were tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. Her shoulders curved inward, as if she was trying to make herself smaller, trying to take up less space in a world that had already decided she didn't matter much. That night, for the first time since Jessica was born, I allowed myself to think the unthinkable. What if she doesn't really love me? What if everything I thought was temporary stress and career pressure was actually something much more permanent and painful? What if I had spent 35 years giving unconditional love to someone who saw that love as a resource to be exploited, rather than a gift to be treasured? The thought was so devastating that I pushed it away immediately. But like a weed, it had already taken root. And weeds, as any gardener knows, are almost impossible to get rid of once they start growing. Winter settled over New York like a heavy blanket, and my situation grew more desperate by the week. I had scraped together enough money for 1 month's rent by selling my television, my microwave, and some books I'd collected over the years. But it was a temporary solution to a permanent problem. Unless something changed dramatically, I would be homeless by February. I called Jessica every few days, always reaching voicemail, always leaving increasingly desperate messages. Finally, 2 weeks before Christmas, she called me back. "Mom, I got your messages," she said without preamble. Her voice had that crisp, efficient tone she used with everyone these days, the tone of someone who had important places to be and limited time for interruptions. "Jessica, thank God. I need to talk to you about—" "Look, I know what this is about. You need money again. But Mom, you have to understand. This pattern isn't sustainable. David and I have been talking, and we think you need to learn better financial management. Maybe move somewhere cheaper. Queens, or even New Jersey. You're living beyond your means in Manhattan." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Living beyond my means. In a studio apartment that was smaller than her walk-in closet. Eating generic cereal for dinner some nights because I couldn't afford anything else. "Honey, you don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm facing eviction. I gave you that money for David's surgery, and now I can't make rent. I just need— You gave me that money because you wanted to help. No one forced you to do that. You can't give money away and then expect other people to bail you out when you can't pay your bills." The words hit me like a physical blow. I had to sit down on my bed to catch my breath. "Jessica, I'm your mother. I gave you that money because you called me crying, saying you didn't know what you were going to do. I've given you money dozens of times over the years because I love you, and I want to help you when you're struggling. And I appreciate that, Mom. I really do. But you're 73 years old. You should have your finances figured out by now. David and I work 60-hour weeks to afford our lifestyle. We can't keep rescuing family members who make poor financial decisions. Family members. As if I was some distant relative instead of the woman who had sacrificed her own financial security over and over again to help her. What am I supposed to do? I whispered. Where am I supposed to go? There are programs for seniors, assisted living facilities, social services. You have options, Mom. You just need to stop depending on other people to solve your problems. She hung up before I could respond. I sat holding the phone to my ear long after the dial tone started, as if keeping the connection open might somehow change what had just happened. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay in my bed listening to the sounds of the city outside, police sirens, late-night conversations from people walking home from bars, the occasional car alarm. But inside my apartment, the silence was absolute. It was the silence of a life that had been slowly emptying out, relationship by relationship, until there was nothing left but an old woman and her regrets. Christmas came and went without a word from Jessica. I spent it alone, as I had Thanksgiving, but this time I didn't even bother with the pretense of turkey or wine. I ate a peanut butter sandwich and watched an old movie on my neighbor's borrowed laptop, trying to distract myself from the eviction notice that now had less than 2 weeks left on its deadline. Sarah Martinez, my neighbor from across the hall, knocked on my door 3 days after Christmas. She was about my age, a retired nurse whose husband had passed away the year before. We'd exchanged pleasantries in the hallway over the years, but we'd never been close friends. "Margaret, honey, I couldn't help but notice you seemed troubled lately," she said when I opened the door. "Is everything okay?" Something about her gentle tone, the genuine concern in her eyes, broke the dam I had been building around my emotions for months. I started crying right there in my doorway, ugly tears that came from somewhere deep and wounded that I had been trying to ignore. Sarah stepped inside my apartment without being invited and guided me to my couch. She sat beside me and handed me tissues from her purse, not saying anything, just letting me cry until there were no tears left. When I finally composed myself enough to speak, the whole story came pouring out. The eviction notice, Jessica's rejection, the years of financial sacrifices that had led to this moment, the growing realization that my daughter saw me not as a person worthy of love and respect, but as a resource to be used when convenient and ignored when not. Sarah listened without judgment, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When I finished talking, she was quiet for a long moment. "How long has this been going on?" she finally asked. I thought about it, really thought about it, tracing the pattern back through years of interactions I had reframed in my mind as love. "Maybe 10 years, I admitted, since she got married. But I kept telling myself it was just temporary. Career stress, you know. The demands of building a life with a new husband. I thought once things settled down, we'd be close again like we used to be." "Margaret, I need to tell you something, and it might be hard to hear," Sarah said gently. "This isn't about career stress or being busy. This is about someone who's learned that they can treat you badly and face no consequences. You've taught her that your love is unconditional, which means she never has to earn it or work to keep it." The words stung because they rang with truth I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. "But she's my daughter," I said weakly. "Aren't mothers supposed to love unconditionally? Love unconditionally, yes, but accept disrespect and abuse unconditionally? No. There's a difference between loving someone and enabling someone. And honey, you've been enabling Jessica to treat you like garbage for so long that she's forgotten you're a human being with feelings and needs." That night, after Sarah went back to her apartment, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got angry. Really, truly, bone-deep angry. Not the quick flash of irritation that fades in an hour, but the kind of anger that burns steady and low. The kind that changes you. I was angry at Jessica for taking my love for granted. I was angry at myself for allowing it to happen. I was angry at a world that had taught me that a mother's value was measured by how much she was willing to sacrifice. how much pain she was willing to absorb, how little she was willing to expect in return. But underneath the anger was something else. Something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. It was self-respect, emerging like a stubborn flower pushing through concrete. The next morning, I did something that surprised even me. Instead of calling Jessica again, instead of begging or explaining or trying to convince her to help me, I called the number Sarah had given me for a legal aid office that helped seniors with housing issues. The lawyer, a kind woman in her 40s named Patricia Reeves, listened to my story with professional sympathy. "Mrs. Chen, I have to be honest with you. Your landlord has every right to evict you for non-payment of rent, but we might be able to negotiate a payment plan or connect you with emergency assistance programs. The first step is understanding exactly what your financial situation looks like." We spent 2 hours going through my finances. It was humiliating to lay out exactly how little I had, exactly how precarious my situation was. But it was also liberating in a strange way. For the first time in years, someone was looking at my life with clear eyes, without the distortion of guilt or obligation or family dynamics. "You're not financially irresponsible," Patricia said when we finished. "You're financially generous to the point of self-destruction. There's a difference. The question now is whether you're ready to start making different choices." The question haunted me for days. Was I ready to make different choices? The choices that would mean saying no to Jessica when she called needing money. The choices that would mean prioritizing my own survival over her convenience. The choices that might mean losing what little relationship we still had. The answer came to me on New Year's Eve. I was sitting alone in my apartment, listening to the celebrations happening all over the city. Fireworks and parties and people welcoming a new year full of possibilities. At 73, how many new years did I have left? How many chances to choose dignity over dysfunction, self-respect over slavish devotion to someone who had forgotten how to love me back? I made a resolution that night, not to lose weight or exercise more or read more books, but to stop being afraid of my daughter's disapproval. To stop trading my self-worth for scraps of attention from someone who had long since stopped seeing me as a person worthy of basic consideration. The opportunity to test my resolve came sooner than I expected. 2 weeks into January, my phone rang at 11 o'clock at night. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and my heart did its automatic leap of hope and anxiety. But this time, instead of answering on the first ring like a dog responding to its master's whistle, I let it ring 3 times. 4, 5. "Hello?" I said, and was surprised by how calm my voice sounded. "Mom, thank God you answered. I need your help. David lost his job. The company had massive layoffs, and he was one of them. We're going to lose the house if we can't make the mortgage payment next week. I know you don't have much, but if you could just lend us whatever you have in your savings account, we'll pay you back as soon as he finds something new." The old Margaret would have already been mentally calculating how much I could scrape together. The old Margaret would have been making promises and assurances, already planning which possessions I could sell and which bills I could skip paying. But the old Margaret was gone. "I don't have a savings account, Jessica," I said quietly. "I haven't had a savings account in 5 years. Every time I manage to save a little money, you call needing help with something, and I give it to you. Mom, please. This is serious. We could lose everything." So could I. I am losing everything. I'm being evicted from my apartment because I gave you money for David's surgery instead of paying my rent. I've sold everything I own trying to help you over the years. I don't have anything left to give. There was silence on the other end of the line. When Jessica spoke again, her voice had changed. Gone was the desperate daughter asking for help. In her place was someone cold and calculating. "Fine. If that's how you want to be, I guess I know where I stand with you." "Where you stand with me?" The words came out louder than I intended. "Jessica, do you have any idea where I stand with you? When's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you visited me, or invited me to visit you? When's the last time you showed any interest in my life that wasn't related to what I could give you? I've been busy. Everyone's busy, Jessica. But people make time for the things that matter to them. Clearly, I don't matter to you unless I'm useful to you. That's not true, isn't it? When's my birthday, Jessica?" Silence. "When's my birthday?" It's in the spring sometime. March 15th. It was 2 months ago. You didn't call. You didn't send a card. You forgot completely, didn't you? More silence. What's my favorite color? What's my middle name? What did I want to be when I was young before I dropped out of college to work full-time to support you after your father left? Mom, these questions are ridiculous. Are they? Because I know everything about you, Jessica. I know you're allergic to shellfish and afraid of thunderstorms. I know you wanted to be a veterinarian until you decided you couldn't stand the sight of blood. I know your middle name is Rose, after my grandmother. I know your favorite food is the chicken parmesan I used to make on Sundays. I know you because I love you, but you don't know me because you don't see me as a person. You see me as a function, the person who gives you money when you need it and disappears when you don't. You're my mother. Of course I love you. No, Jessica. You love the idea of having a mother. You love having someone who puts your needs before her own survival. But you don't love me. You don't even know me well enough to love me. I hung up the phone before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years, they weren't shaking with fear or desperation. They were shaking with the aftermath of speaking truth. The phone rang again immediately. I let it go to voicemail. It rang 5 more times over the next hour. 5 voicemails I didn't listen to, because I knew what they would contain. Guilt trips and emotional manipulation and accusations designed to make me feel terrible for finally standing up for myself. The next morning brought a series of text messages. Mom, I can't believe how selfish you're being. We're about to lose our house and you're worried about birthday cards? David is devastated. He's talking about moving back in with his parents because of your refusal to help family. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. You were always more concerned with yourself than with me. That last text was so laughably untrue that I actually laughed out loud. 35 years of putting her needs before my own, and I was selfish for finally setting a boundary. But the texts kept coming. Fine, don't help us. But don't expect me to come running when you need something. This goes both ways, Mom. I'm telling David's parents what kind of person you really are. They've always been so generous with us. They'll be shocked to learn how selfish my mother is compared to them. I hope you're happy. You're destroying our family over money. I turned my phone off and didn't turn it back on for 3 days. During those 3 days of silence, something remarkable happened. The constant anxiety I had been carrying for years. The anxiety of waiting for Jessica to need something, of wondering if I was doing enough, of fearing her disapproval, began to lift. I slept better than I had in months. I ate regular meals instead of skipping them to save money for her emergencies. I took walks around the neighborhood and actually noticed things. The way the winter light hit the buildings, the sound of children playing in the park, the smell of coffee and fresh bread from the corner deli. Sarah knocked on my door on the 3rd day. I wanted to check on you, she said. I haven't heard you moving around much, and I was worried. I invited her in for tea, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had something positive to share. I did it, I told her. I said no. Jessica called asking for money, and I said no. Sarah's face lit up with something that looked like pride. How do you feel? I thought about it carefully. Scared. Sad. But also, free? Is that terrible to say about your own daughter? It's human, Sarah said. You've been in prison, honey. A prison made of guilt and obligation and fear. Of course it feels scary to walk out. But also, yes, free. We talked for hours that afternoon. Sarah told me about her own struggles with her adult son, who had been financially dependent on his parents well into his 40s. She told me about the day she and her late husband decided to stop enabling him and how difficult but ultimately liberating it had been. The hardest part, she said, was accepting that loving someone doesn't mean you have to let them destroy you. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is stop making their problems your problems. It forces them to grow up and deal with their own lives. What if she never speaks to me again? I asked. Then you'll know who she really was, Sarah said gently. A person who only loved you for what you could give her. And as much as that would hurt, wouldn't it be better to know the truth than to spend the rest of your life wondering why nothing you do is ever enough? That evening, I turned my phone back on. 15 voicemails. 23 text messages. I deleted them all without reading or listening to them. Instead, I called Patricia Reeves at the legal aid office. Mrs. Chen, I'm glad you called. I have some good news. We found emergency housing assistance that can help you catch up on your rent. It's not a loan. It's a grant specifically for seniors facing eviction due to financial hardship. The paperwork is complex, but if you're willing to come in tomorrow morning, we can get the process started. For the first time in months, I went to sleep that night without the crushing weight of impending homelessness pressing down on my chest. The paperwork took 3 weeks to process, but on a cold February morning, Patricia called to tell me the grant had been approved. $3,000 to catch up on back rent, plus resources for ongoing support to help me manage my finances better. There's one condition, she said. You have to agree to participate in financial counseling to make sure this situation doesn't happen again. Yes, I said immediately. Absolutely yes. The financial counselor, a patient woman named Gloria Washington, helped me see my spending patterns with clear eyes. We created a budget that prioritized my basic needs: rent, food, utilities, medication. Before anything else, we set up a small savings account that I promised not to touch except for genuine emergencies. Most importantly, we talked about the difference between helping and enabling. Mrs. Chen, I see this all the time with my older clients, Gloria said during our third session. You raised your children to believe they could depend on you for everything. But there's a difference between being dependable and being a bottomless well of resources. Your daughter is 35 years old. She has a college education and professional experience. Her financial problems are not your responsibility to solve. But what if she's really in trouble? I asked. Then she'll figure it out the way adults do. She'll cut expenses, find additional income, ask for help from her husband's family, apply for assistance programs, or face the natural consequences of her financial decisions. What she won't do is learn to be financially responsible as long as she knows you'll bail her out. It made sense intellectually, but emotionally, it was still difficult. 35 years of defining myself as Jessica's mother, as someone whose primary value was what I could provide for her, didn't disappear overnight. But gradually, something shifted. Instead of waiting for my phone to ring with the next crisis I would be expected to solve, I started filling my days with other things. I volunteered at a literacy program at the local library, helping immigrants learn to read English. I joined a senior walking group that met in Central Park twice a week. I started cooking real meals for myself again, remembering how much I enjoyed the process of creating something nourishing and beautiful. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came a sense of renewal I hadn't felt in decades. I was walking through the park after my volunteer shift at the library when my phone rang. For a moment, my old reflexes kicked in. The automatic assumption that a ringing phone meant someone needed something from me. But when I looked at the screen, I didn't recognize the number. Hello? Is this Margaret Chen? Yes. Who is this? This is Channel 7 News. We're calling about the lottery ticket you purchased at Sullivan's Market on Broadway. Are you available to speak with a reporter? I almost hung up, assuming it was some kind of scam, but something in the woman's voice made me pause. I'm sorry, what about a lottery ticket? Ma'am, are you aware that you won the New York State Mega Millions jackpot? $22 million. Your ticket was purchased 3 weeks ago at Sullivan's Market. The winning numbers were announced last night. The world stopped moving. I sat down heavily on a park bench, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. That's not possible, I whispered. Ma'am, are you all right? Would you like me to give you the winning numbers so you can check your ticket? In a daze, I fumbled through my purse for my wallet. Tucked behind my driver's license was the lottery ticket I had bought on impulse 3 weeks earlier. It was something I almost never did. I couldn't afford to waste money on gambling. But I had been having a particularly good day after my walking group, and I had found a $5 bill in my coat pocket I had forgotten about. The reporter read the numbers. I looked at my ticket. They matched. Every single one. Mrs. Chen, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. We'd like to send a camera crew to interview you this afternoon if possible. This is quite a story. A senior citizen from the Upper West Side winning one of the biggest jackpots in New York history. Our viewers would love to hear about your plans for the money. I gave them my address in a fog, not fully processing what was happening. $22 million. More money than I had ever imagined having. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I called Sarah from the park, my voice shaking with shock and disbelief. Sarah, something impossible has happened. I won the lottery. $22 million. There are news people coming to my apartment this afternoon. Sarah shrieked so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Margaret, oh my God, are you serious? This is incredible. I'm coming over right now to help you get ready. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah helped me choose a dress that didn't look too shabby on camera and coached me on what to say to reporters. The news crew arrived at 3 o'clock. A reporter, a cameraman, and a producer who took over my tiny apartment with their equipment and energy. This is such an inspiring story, the reporter said as they set up their shot. A grandmother from the Upper West Side, living modestly on Social Security, wins $22 million. What are you going to do with all that money? I hadn't even begun to think about it. The reality of the situation was still sinking in slowly, like water soaking into dry earth. I suppose I'll be able to pay my rent, I said, and everyone laughed as if I was being charmingly modest. But I was completely serious. After months of worrying about eviction, the idea that I would never have to worry about rent again felt more miraculous than the money itself. The interview aired on the evening news. I looked older and more frail than I expected, but my voice was steady as I talked about my plans to be responsible with the money, to help others in need, and to finally travel to some of the places I had dreamed of visiting my whole life. What I didn't mention to the reporter was that I hadn't told Jessica about the lottery win. I hadn't called her, hadn't sent a text, hadn't reached out at all. For the first time in 35 years, something major had happened in my life, and my first instinct wasn't to share it with my daughter. That impulse lasted exactly 47 minutes after the news story aired. My phone started ringing at 6:47 p.m., Jessica's name on the screen. I stared at it for a moment, remembering all the times over the past few months that I had called her and gotten voicemail. All the times I had needed her, and she had been too busy to respond. I answered on the 5th ring. Mom! Oh my God, Mom, I just saw the news. I can't believe it. $22 million. This is incredible. This is life-changing. I'm so happy for you. Her voice was bright and excited in a way I hadn't heard since she was a child on Christmas morning. But underneath the excitement, I could hear something else. The same tone she used when she was about to ask me for something. Hello, Jessica, I said calmly. Mom, I'm so sorry I haven't called in a while. Work has been absolutely insane, and David's job situation has been so stressful. But I've been thinking about you constantly. I was actually planning to call you tomorrow to check in and see how you were doing. The lie was so smooth and practiced that I wondered how many times she had used similar lines with other people. I was actually planning to call you. I've been thinking about you constantly. Words designed to make me believe that her sudden interest in my well-being was genuine rather than motivated by the 22 million reasons that had just appeared in my life. I'm doing well, I said. Better than I have in years, actually. I'm so proud of you. You deserve this after everything you've been through. And Mom, I want you to know that David and I are here for you. I know managing this kind of money can be overwhelming, especially for someone your age. We want to help you make smart decisions about investments and taxes and all the complicated financial stuff, someone my age. As if being 73 automatically meant I was incompetent to handle my own affairs. As if the woman who had managed to survive on Social Security while repeatedly bailing out her financially irresponsible daughter couldn't be trusted with financial decisions. That's very kind of you to offer, I said. But I've already spoken with financial advisors and tax lawyers. Everything is being handled appropriately. Oh, well that's great. But Mom, family should handle family business, you know? David works in investment banking. He knows about these things. We don't want you getting taken advantage of by some stranger who doesn't care about you the way we do. We. As if she and David were a united front of concern for my well-being, rather than two people who had ignored me for months until money entered the picture. Jessica, I need to ask you something, I said. When did you last call me before today? What? The last time you called me before you found out about the lottery. When was it? Silence. I call you all the time, Mom. No, you don't. The last time you called me was 6 weeks ago when you wanted money for David's mortgage payment. Before that, it was 3 months earlier when you needed money for car repairs. I can count on one hand the number of times you've called me in the past year that weren't related to needing money. Mom, that's not... I've been busy. Everyone keeps saying that you've been busy. But busy doing what, Jessica? Too busy to call your mother on her birthday? Too busy to return her calls when she's facing eviction? Too busy to acknowledge her text messages asking about Thanksgiving dinner? What exactly have you been so busy with that you couldn't spare 5 minutes to check on the person who raised you? Silence again. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its enthusiastic brightness. I know I haven't been the best daughter lately, but Mom, this lottery win, it's like a fresh start for both of us. We can put the past behind us and focus on moving forward as a family. What kind of family are you talking about, Jessica? The kind where I give you money whenever you ask, and you ignore me the rest of the time. Because that's the only relationship we've had for years. That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me one thing about my life that doesn't involve money. Tell me what I do with my days, who my friends are, what I worry about, what makes me happy. Tell me anything about me as a person, rather than as a source of financial support. More silence. I know you volunteer at the library. How do you know that? You mentioned it? When? When did I mention it? Because I've been volunteering there for 6 months, and I've never spoken to you about it. You're guessing, aren't you? You remember me mentioning libraries at some point, so you're guessing that I might volunteer at one. Mom, these questions are unfair. Just because I can't remember every detail of every conversation doesn't mean I don't care about you. But it does mean exactly that, Jessica. People remember details about the lives of people they care about. They ask questions and listen to the answers. They check in when things get difficult. They show up when they're needed. You haven't done any of those things in years. So what are you saying? That I'm a terrible daughter? That I don't love you? The question hung in the air between us. A few months ago, I would have rushed to reassure her, to take back my words, to smooth over the conflict at my own emotional expense. But I was no longer the same woman who would sacrifice truth for peace. I'm saying that love is more than words, Jessica. Love is actions. Love is interest. Love is presence. Love is treating someone like they matter even when you don't need anything from them. And by that definition, no, you haven't loved me in a very long time. Ibao. The silence that followed was so long I thought she might have hung up. I can't believe you're saying this to me, she finally whispered. After everything I've been through with David's job loss, after all the stress we've been under, you're attacking me because I haven't been the perfect daughter. I'm not attacking you. I'm telling you the truth about our relationship. And I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to care enough to occasionally ask how I'm doing without wanting something in return. Fine. How are you doing, Mom? Are you happy now? The sarcasm in her voice was unmistakable. She was asking not because she wanted to know, but to prove a point about how unreasonable I was being. I'm doing much better since I stopped waiting for you to care, I said quietly. She hung up on me. I sat holding the phone for a long time after the call ended, feeling an odd mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the relationship I had hoped we could have, and relief that I had finally stopped pretending we had something we didn't. The next morning brought a barrage of messages from Jessica, text after text, each one following a predictable pattern: guilt, manipulation, accusation, and then attempts at emotional blackmail. I can't sleep after what you said to me. How can you be so cruel to your own daughter? David is furious with the way you treated me. He says he's never seen someone be so ungrateful to their own family. I called Grandma's sister Ruth, and she's shocked by your attitude. She said Grandma would be ashamed of how you're treating me. Fine, keep your lottery money. I don't want anything from someone who can be so heartless to their own child. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed our relationship over money. When you're old and alone and have no one to take care of you, remember that you chose this. I read each message with growing clarity about who Jessica really was. Not the daughter I had raised, but the person she had chosen to become. Someone who saw love as a transaction, who viewed relationships as resources to be mined, who believed that being family gave her the right to unlimited access to my emotional and financial reserves without offering anything in return. But the last message was different. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I've been selfish. I know I haven't been the daughter you deserve. But I love you, and I don't want to lose you. Can we please talk? Can we please try to work this out? I'll do better, I promise. You're all I have. For a moment, my heart softened. This sounded like the Jessica I remembered. The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. Maybe she really had learned something from our confrontation. Maybe she was finally ready to have an adult relationship based on mutual respect rather than one-sided dependence. I called her back. Jessica, I got your message. Mom, thank God. Listen, I've been thinking about what you said, and you're absolutely right. I haven't been fair to you. I've been so focused on my own problems that I forgot to consider your feelings. I want to change that. She sounded sincere, contrite, like someone who had done some genuine soul-searching and come to honest conclusions about her behavior. I'm glad to hear that, I said carefully. I was thinking we could meet for dinner tonight to talk, just the two of us. And Mom, I want you to know that this isn't about the money. I would want to fix our relationship even if you hadn't won the lottery. Okay, I said. Where would you like to meet? Actually, I was hoping you could come to our house. I'll cook your favorite dinner, the chicken parmesan you used to make for me when I was little. David is working late, so it'll be just us girls, like old times. Something in her voice made me pause. Too eager, too bright, like someone reading from a script. Jessica, your house is in Connecticut. That's almost a 3-hour round trip for me by train. I know, but Mom, we have so much to talk about, and I want us to have privacy. Plus, I want to show you some changes we've made to the house. And honestly, I think it would be good for you to get out of the city for a while. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. Jessica, who hadn't invited me to visit in over 2 years, suddenly wanted me to make a 3-hour trip to see house renovations and have a heart-to-heart conversation. Why don't we meet somewhere in Manhattan? I suggested. There are plenty of quiet restaurants where we could talk. Mom, please, I'm trying to make an effort here. I'm offering to cook for you, to give us real time together without distractions. Can't you meet me halfway? Meet her halfway, by traveling 3 hours to her house while she traveled 0 minutes to accommodate me. Jessica, I'm 73 years old. 3 hours on trains and buses is exhausting for me. If you really want to repair our relationship, surely you can come into the city. I can't tonight. I have too many things to prepare for tomorrow. But Mom, this is important. If you really want our relationship to change, you need to show some effort too. And there it was. The subtle shift from apology to accusation. The implication that if I didn't accept her terms, I was the one not trying hard enough to fix things. I need to think about it, I said. What's to think about? I'm your daughter. I'm apologizing. I'm asking for a chance to make things right. Isn't that what you wanted? What I wanted was genuine change, not manipulation dressed up as an apology. What I wanted was a daughter who cared enough about my time and comfort to meet me somewhere convenient, rather than demanding I exhaust myself traveling to her. I'll call you back later today, I said, and hung up before she could pressure me further. I spent the afternoon walking through Central Park, thinking about the conversation. The old Margaret would have been on a train to Connecticut by now, grateful for any attention from Jessica, willing to interpret her demands as love. But the new Margaret, the one who had learned to recognize manipulation, the one who had started valuing her own comfort and dignity, saw the situation clearly. This wasn't about repairing our relationship. This was about Jessica maintaining control, making sure any reconciliation happened on her terms, in her space, with her agenda driving the conversation. I called Sarah and told her about the invitation. What does your gut tell you? Sarah asked. My gut tells me this is another manipulation, that she wants me in her house because she has some kind of plan, maybe to guilt me about their financial situation, maybe to pressure me into making some kind of financial commitment, maybe just to make sure the conversation happens in an environment where she has all the advantages. Then trust your gut. You've earned the right to demand that people meet you halfway, literally and figuratively. That evening, I called Jessica back. "I've decided I'd prefer to meet in Manhattan," I said. "There's a quiet Italian restaurant near Lincoln Center. We could meet there tomorrow night at 7. "Mom, I can't do that. I already bought groceries to cook for you. I already rearranged my whole schedule. You're being unreasonable." "I'm being unreasonable by asking you to travel to see me the way I've traveled to see you hundreds of times over the years? That's different. You don't have a job or major responsibilities. You have time to travel." The casual dismissal of my life, my time, my comfort was so complete that I almost laughed. I didn't have major responsibilities, as if volunteering at the library, managing my household, maintaining my health, and navigating the complexities of being a senior citizen in New York City weren't real commitments worthy of consideration. "Jessica, if you want to have dinner with me, you know where to find me. I'll be happy to meet you at a restaurant in Manhattan any evening this week. If that doesn't work for your schedule, we can talk on the phone." Unbelievable. I try to reach out, I try to fix our relationship, and you throw it back in my face. "Fine, Mom. Have it your way. But don't blame me when we don't have a relationship anymore." She hung up again. But this time, instead of feeling guilty or anxious, I felt something unexpected. Pride. Pride that I had recognized manipulation and refused to be drawn into it. Pride that I had set a reasonable boundary and stuck to it even when pressured. Pride that I was finally learning the difference between being loving and being a doormat. 2 days later, Sarah knocked on my door with a concerned expression. "Margaret, have you seen today's newspaper?" She handed me a copy of the New York Post. On page 3, there was a small but noticeable article with the headline, "Lottery Winners Family Feud. Daughter Claims Mother Has Gone Crazy with Money." My hands shook as I read the article. Jessica had given an interview to a reporter, painting herself as a concerned daughter worried about her elderly mother's mental state and poor decisions since winning the lottery. "She's completely changed," Jessica was quoted as saying. "She's become paranoid and suspicious of everyone, including her own family. She's making terrible financial decisions and refusing to listen to anyone who tries to help her. We're concerned she might have early dementia or that someone is taking advantage of her vulnerability." The article went on to describe me as reclusive and erratic, suggesting that my lottery win had somehow unhinged me from reality. It quoted unnamed family friends expressing concern about my mental health and ability to handle large sums of money responsibly. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not content with manipulating me privately, Jessica had decided to humiliate me publicly. She had twisted our conflict into a story that painted her as a caring daughter, and me as a crazy old woman who couldn't be trusted with her own affairs. Sarah sat beside me on the couch as I read, her hand on my shoulder for support. "I can't believe she would do this to you," Sarah said quietly. "I can," I said, surprised by how calm I sounded. "This is who she is. This is who she's been all along. I just refused to see it, because I loved the person I wanted her to be instead of accepting the person she actually is." That afternoon, my phone started ringing, reporters wanting comments about the article, distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly concerned about my well-being, neighbors asking if I was all right. The attention was overwhelming and embarrassing, but it was also clarifying, because buried in all the chaos and humiliation was a gift. The absolute certainty that I had been right to establish boundaries with Jessica. Someone who truly loved me would never have tried to embarrass me publicly as a way of winning a private argument. Someone who genuinely cared about my well-being would never have aired our family conflicts in the newspaper to make herself look sympathetic. The article was Jessica's final gift to me, the death of any lingering doubt about whether I was being too harsh, too demanding, too unforgiving. She had shown me exactly who she was, and I finally believed her. That evening, I did something I had never done before. I blocked Jessica's phone number. I blocked her on social media. I instructed my doorman not to let her up to my apartment without my explicit permission. For the first time in 35 years, I completely cut off access to me. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Spring turned into summer, and gradually, the attention from the article died down. I hired a publicist who helped me craft a brief statement about my mental competency and my right to privacy regarding family matters. The financial advisors I was working with vouched for my lucidity and decision-making capacity. Within a few weeks, the story was forgotten, replaced by newer scandals and dramas. But I wasn't forgotten. Not by the people who actually mattered. My volunteering at the library had expanded. I was now helping to run a program that taught financial literacy to seniors. Ironic, considering Jessica's public claims about my inability to handle money responsibly. The work was fulfilling in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I was helping people, making a difference, using my time and energy for something meaningful. My walking group had become a genuine social circle. 3 times a week, 6 women in their 60s and 70s met to walk through different neighborhoods of Manhattan, exploring restaurants and museums and parks. We had started having dinner together once a month, sharing stories and advice and laughter in a way that reminded me what healthy relationships felt like. Sarah had become more than a neighbor. She had become a true friend. We traveled together to the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, a trip I had dreamed of taking for decades but had never been able to afford. We stayed at a charming bed and breakfast overlooking Seneca Lake, took cooking classes at a local culinary school, and spent hours just talking and laughing and enjoying each other's company. For the first time in years, I was building a life based on what brought me joy rather than what other people expected from me. I was rediscovering interests I had abandoned when Jessica was young, painting, gardening, reading fiction instead of just self-help books about how to be a better parent or cope with difficult adult children. The lottery money, after taxes and careful financial planning, left me with more security than I had ever imagined possible. I moved out of my tiny studio into a beautiful 1-bedroom apartment with a view of the Hudson River. I bought quality furniture, fresh flowers for my table, and clothes that fit properly and made me feel attractive. I hired a housekeeping service so I could spend my time on activities I enjoyed rather than exhausting chores. But more importantly, I was learning to invest in relationships that nourished me rather than depleted me. I was developing friendships with people who were interested in me as a person, who asked about my day and remembered my answers, who showed up when I needed support and celebrated when good things happened to me. In August, on what would have been Jessica's 36th birthday, I did something that surprised even me. Instead of sending her a card or gift as I had every year for 36 years, I wrote a letter I never intended to send. It was a way of processing my feelings, of saying goodbye to the relationship I had hoped for, and accepting the reality of what had actually existed. Dear Jessica, I wrote, today is your birthday, and for the first time since you were born, I'm not celebrating. Not because I don't love you, but because I finally understand that love without respect is just enabling, and respect without reciprocity is just self-destruction. I spent 35 years trying to be the perfect mother, giving you everything I had, and then finding ways to give more. I thought if I loved you enough, sacrificed enough, supported you enough, you would eventually love me back the same way. But I was wrong about how relationships work. You taught me that I can't make someone love me by being indispensable to them. You taught me that giving someone everything they want doesn't make them value you. It teaches them to take you for granted. You taught me that unconditional love from a parent can become permission for an adult child to behave unconditionally badly. I don't regret loving you. I don't regret the sacrifices I made when you were young and genuinely needed me. But I do regret not teaching you that relationships require effort from both people, that love is a verb that requires action, that being family doesn't give you the right to treat people badly without consequences. I hope someday you learn to build relationships based on mutual respect, rather than one-sided exploitation. I hope you learn to love people for who they are rather than what they can give you. I hope you learn that being a daughter is about more than calling when you need money. But I'm not going to wait for that growth anymore. I'm going to live my life for me, surrounded by people who see value in my existence beyond my utility to them. I will always love the little girl you were, but I don't like the woman you became, and I'm finally okay with that truth. I sealed the letter in an envelope and put it in my desk drawer. Writing it helped me process the grief I was feeling. Grief not for Jessica as she was, but for the relationship that had never really existed except in my imagination. Fall arrived with the kind of crisp, golden beauty that makes you grateful to be alive. I had started taking painting classes at a community center near my new apartment. My instructor, a patient woman in her 50s named Maria Elena, encouraged us to paint from life rather than photographs, to really look at the world around us and capture not just what we saw, but what we felt. I found myself drawn to painting windows with light streaming through them, windows reflecting the changing seasons, windows that suggested lives being lived on the other side of the glass. Maria Elena told me they were symbols of possibility, of looking forward rather than back, of being open to whatever came next. On a Thursday evening in October, I was cleaning my brushes after class when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I had learned to be protective of my peace, to not let every ringing phone derail my tranquility. But something made me look at the screen. It was Jessica. For a moment, my old reflexes kicked in. The automatic worry that she might be in real trouble, that she might genuinely need me, that ignoring her call might mean missing a chance to help someone I had loved for 35 years. But then I remembered the newspaper article, the public humiliation designed to force me into submission, the manipulation disguised as apology, the complete inability to meet me halfway, literally or figuratively, in any attempt at reconciliation. I let the call go to voicemail. 20 minutes later, curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to the message. "Mom, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to call. David and I are getting divorced. He cleaned out our bank accounts and moved in with his secretary. I'm going to lose the house. I don't have anywhere to go. I know I've been awful to you, and I know you have every right to hang up on me, but I'm scared and alone, and I don't know what to do. You're the only person I have left. Please call me back. Please don't abandon me when I need you most." My heart clenched automatically at the pain in her voice. She sounded genuinely frightened, genuinely desperate. The part of me that had spent 35 years trying to rescue her from every crisis wanted to call her back immediately, wanted to offer comfort and solutions and whatever help she needed. But the part of me that had learned to recognize patterns, that had developed the capacity for self-protection, made me pause and think. How many times had I heard this script before? Crisis, desperation, appeals to guilt and maternal obligation, promises that this time would be different if only I would help just one more time. How many times had I responded to that script by dropping everything to solve her problems, only to be ignored again once the crisis passed? I called Sarah. Jessica called, I told her. She's getting divorced. She's about to lose her house. She says she doesn't have anywhere to go. How do you feel? Sarah asked. Conflicted. Part of me wants to help her. She's my daughter, and she sounds genuinely scared. But part of me wonders if this is just another manipulation. What would helping her look like? I thought about it. Probably letting her move in with me. Probably giving her money to get back on her feet. Probably becoming her emotional and financial support system while she rebuilds her life. And then what happens when she's back on her feet? The question hung in the air. We both knew the answer. When Jessica was stable again, when she had found a new relationship or a new source of support, I would go back to being an inconvenience she didn't have time for. Margaret, Sarah said gently, what would happen if you didn't rescue her? If you let her figure out this crisis the way other adults do? She'd be forced to find other solutions. She'd have to ask her friends for help, or David's family, or social services, or find transitional housing, or move back in with her college roommate, or any of the dozens of options available to a healthy 36-year-old woman with a college education and work experience. And would that be bad for her? No, I said slowly. It would probably be good for her. It would force her to develop coping skills and independence and relationships that aren't based on taking advantage of someone's parental guilt. So the real question isn't whether she needs help. The real question is whether helping her would actually help her, or whether it would just enable her to continue avoiding accountability for her own life. That night, I wrote another letter I didn't intend to send. Dear Jessica, I got your voicemail, and I'm sorry to hear about your divorce and your financial difficulties. I know this must be a frightening and overwhelming time for you, but I'm not going to rescue you. Not because I don't love you, but because I do love you enough to stop enabling patterns that have prevented you from growing into a truly independent adult. For 35 years, I have solved your problems, bankrolled your mistakes, and cushioned you from the natural consequences of your decisions. And in 35 years, you have never learned to cope with crisis without calling me for money. You are a smart, educated, capable woman with work experience, social skills, and legal rights. You have the tools to handle this situation without me. You can file for divorce support, apply for assistance programs, stay with friends, find temporary housing, or explore any of the other options available to adults facing difficult life transitions. What you cannot do is continue using me as your personal emergency fund while also treating me as if I don't exist when your life is going well. I hope you find a way through this crisis that helps you develop real independence and real relationships based on mutual respect, rather than one-sided dependence. But I won't be part of that process by enabling you to avoid it. I wish you well, but I'm done being your safety net. I folded this letter and put it in the drawer with the first one. Writing helped me clarify my thoughts, helped me resist the magnetic pull of old patterns that had defined our relationship for so long. Jessica called 4 more times over the next 2 weeks. I didn't answer any of the calls, but I listened to the voicemails, tracking the predictable progression from desperation to anger, to guilt, trips to threats. Mom, I can't believe you're ignoring me at the worst time of my life. What kind of mother abandons her daughter when she needs help? Fine, don't help me. But when I'm homeless and living in my car, I hope you're happy with yourself. I talked to David's mother, and she can't believe how selfish you're being. She said if it were her daughter, she would never let pride get in the way of helping family. You win, Mom. You made your point. I was a bad daughter, and now you're going to punish me by letting me lose everything. I hope your precious boundaries are worth destroying your relationship with your only child. Each message was designed to hook me, to make me feel guilty enough to break and call her back. But they had the opposite effect. They reminded me exactly why I had needed to establish boundaries in the first place. Even in crisis, even when asking for help, Jessica couldn't manage to speak to me with basic respect or acknowledge any responsibility for the state of our relationship. The voicemails stopped after 2 weeks. I assumed she had found another source of support, or worked out her problems, or simply moved on to manipulating someone else. Then, 3 weeks later, Sarah knocked on my door with another newspaper. I wasn't sure if I should show you this or not, she said hesitantly. This time it was the Connecticut Post, not the New York paper. A small article in the local news section. Local woman finds help after domestic abuse situation. The article described Jessica as a brave survivor of financial abuse, who had escaped a controlling marriage and was rebuilding her life with the help of community resources and domestic violence support services. She was quoted as saying she was grateful for the assistance programs available to women in her situation, and she encouraged other women facing similar circumstances to seek help. There was no mention of me, no suggestion that she had family who had refused to help her, no implication that she had been abandoned by anyone. It was a straightforward story about a woman who had faced a crisis and successfully navigated it using appropriate community resources. She figured it out, I said, feeling a complex mixture of relief and vindication. She found help without me. How does that make you feel? Proud of her, actually. For the first time in years, she handled a major life crisis without manipulating me into solving it for her. Whatever help she got from domestic violence services or social programs or friends, she had to apply for it herself, navigate the systems herself, advocate for herself. Those are adult life skills she never developed because I was always there to solve everything. I was also grateful that I had trusted my instincts instead of being drawn back into patterns that had been unhealthy for both of us. Jessica had survived her crisis without my financial intervention, probably with better long-term results than if I had swooped in to rescue her from the natural consequences of her marriage choices. Winter arrived with the kind of bone-deep cold that makes you appreciate warm apartments and hot coffee, and friends who care enough to check on you. I was settling into a routine that felt sustainable and nourishing, volunteer work that gave me purpose, creative pursuits that fed my soul, social connections that enriched my daily life rather than draining it. I had started hosting a monthly dinner party in my new apartment, cooking elaborate meals for my walking group friends and a few other women I had met through various activities. The conversations ranged from books to travel to grandchildren to politics, but they all shared a quality I hadn't experienced in years: genuine interest in each other's lives and thoughts. These women asked follow-up questions about things I had mentioned in previous conversations. They remembered details about my volunteer work, my painting classes, my concerns about aging parents of friends. They celebrated small victories and offered practical support during challenges. They treated me like someone whose opinions mattered, whose company was valued for its own sake rather than for what I could provide. On Valentine's Day, a holiday I had spent alone for the past several years, Sarah and I decided to take ourselves out for a fancy dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Hudson River. We dressed up, ordered expensive wine, and toasted to friendship and independence and the discovery that life after 70 could still hold surprises and joy. "Do you miss her?" Sarah asked as we walked home along the river, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered jewelry. I thought about the question seriously. Did I miss Jessica? Did I miss the constant anxiety about whether she would call, whether she would need something, whether I would disappoint her or enable her or fail to show enough love or show too much? "I miss the daughter I thought I had," I said finally. "I miss the relationship I imagined we would have when she grew up. I miss the closeness I thought we shared when she was young, but I don't miss the actual relationship we had as adults. I don't miss being taken for granted, being manipulated, being treated like an ATM with emotions. Do you think she'll ever change? I hope so, for her sake. But whether she changes or not isn't my responsibility anymore. My responsibility is to live my own life, to find my own happiness, to build relationships with people who see value in who I am, rather than just what I can give them." Spring returned to New York with its usual dramatic flourish. Trees budding overnight, flowers bursting from window boxes, everyone emerging from winter hibernation with renewed energy and optimism. I had been living in my new apartment for almost a year, and it finally felt like home rather than just a place I was staying. I had started dating, something I hadn't done in over a decade. Nothing serious. Dinner with a retired professor I met at a museum lecture, coffee with a widower from my senior walking group, an afternoon at a botanical garden with a man Sarah had introduced me to from her church. It was refreshing to spend time with people who were interested in getting to know me, who asked about my interests and opinions, who treated me like an interesting person worth spending time with. The lottery money had been invested wisely with the help of financial advisors who specialized in working with seniors. I was drawing a monthly income that allowed me to live comfortably without touching the principal, and I had set aside substantial amounts for charitable giving. I was supporting literacy programs, senior services, and domestic violence shelters, causes that felt meaningful to me based on my own life experiences. I had also started writing. Not letters I didn't intend to send, but actual stories about the experiences of older women navigating adult children, financial challenges, and the process of rebuilding identity after decades of defining yourself primarily as someone's mother. A community college had asked me to teach a workshop on financial literacy for seniors, and a local senior center wanted me to speak about recognizing and avoiding elder financial abuse. My life had become full in a way it hadn't been since Jessica was young. But unlike those early years of motherhood, when my life was full of obligations and responsibilities to other people, this fullness came from choices I was making for myself, activities that energized rather than depleted me, relationships that added value rather than creating stress. On a warm Thursday evening in May, I was watering the plants on my fire escape when my phone rang. I had learned to check caller ID before answering, protecting my peace from telemarketers and spam calls. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Is this Margaret Chen?" "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is Lisa Park. I'm Jessica Davidson's divorce attorney. I'm calling because Jessica has listed you as her emergency contact, and I need to discuss some financial matters related to her divorce settlement." My stomach clenched automatically. Even after months of no contact, the mention of Jessica's name could still trigger my old reflexes of worry and responsibility. "I'm sorry, but Jessica and I don't have a relationship anymore," I said carefully. "I'm not the appropriate person to contact about her legal matters. I understand this is a delicate situation, but ma'am, Jessica has described you as her primary source of financial support over the years. The court needs to understand her financial resources when determining spousal support arrangements. Jessica claims she has no assets and no family financial support. but her ex-husband's attorney is arguing that she has access to family wealth that should be considered in the settlement. I felt a flash of anger so sharp it surprised me. Even in divorce court, even when dealing with legal professionals, Jessica was lying about our relationship. She was claiming to have no family support while simultaneously listing me as her emergency contact, trying to have it both ways. Independence when it served her legal case, and family connection when she might need someone to be responsible for her. "Ma'am," I said firmly, "Jessica is 36 years old. She has not received any financial support from me in over a year, and she will not receive any financial support from me in the future. Whatever resources I have are completely separate from hers, and she has no access to them. If the court needs that information in writing, I'm happy to provide a statement." "I see. And is there bad blood between you? Any family conflict that would explain this estrangement?" The question was harder to answer than it should have been. How do you summarize 35 years of complicated relationship dynamics to a stranger? How do you explain that sometimes love requires saying no? That sometimes protecting someone means refusing to rescue them? That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is force someone to face the consequences of their own choices? "There's no bad blood," I said finally. "There's just recognition that adult relationships require mutual respect and effort from both people. Jessica is capable of managing her own life and her own legal matters. I'm sure she'll figure out solutions that don't involve depending on family members." After I hung up, I sat on my fire escape for a long time, watching the sun set over the Hudson River. The conversation had shaken me more than I expected, not because I had any desire to get involved in Jessica's legal troubles, but because it reminded me how completely our relationship had deteriorated. Once upon a time, Jessica would have called me herself to talk about major life events like divorce settlements. Once upon a time, I would have been someone she turned to for advice and support, not just someone her attorney contacted as an emergency backup plan. The fact that I was hearing about significant developments in her life through third parties was a stark reminder of how much distance now existed between us. But it was also a reminder of why that distance was necessary. Jessica was still trying to play both sides, claiming independence while keeping me listed as emergency contact, denying family support while hoping I might be available if needed, presenting herself as self-sufficient while maintaining backdoor access to me through legal channels. The manipulation was more sophisticated now, but it was still manipulation, and I was finally immune to it. Summer unfolded with lazy warmth, and the kind of social richness I had forgotten was possible. My dinner parties had evolved into a regular gathering of women who had become genuine friends. Sarah and I took a 2-week trip to Italy, something I had dreamed about for decades but had never been able to afford. We stayed in small towns, took cooking classes, visited art museums, and spent hours just sitting in piazzas watching life unfold around us. The trip was a revelation in ways I hadn't expected. For 2 weeks, I was just Margaret. Not someone's mother, not someone's responsibility, not someone defined by my relationships to other people. I was a woman who appreciated good food and beautiful art, who enjoyed learning about history and culture, who could have interesting conversations with strangers and make friends with fellow travelers. I painted watercolor postcards of the places we visited and mailed them to my friends back home. I bought myself beautiful scarves and jewelry without worrying about whether the money could be better spent on someone else's needs. I ate gelato for breakfast and stayed up late drinking wine in sidewalk cafes, rediscovering the simple pleasure of doing things because they brought me joy. When we returned to New York, I felt genuinely refreshed in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The trip had reminded me that life could be an adventure rather than just an endurance test, that there were still experiences to be savored and discoveries to be made, even at my age. Fall arrived with its usual spectacular display, and I found myself busier than I had been in years. My financial literacy workshops had become popular enough that I was invited to speak at senior centers throughout the city. A local television station asked me to be interviewed about elder financial abuse for a consumer protection series. The community college where I had taught the first workshop wanted me to develop a regular curriculum. The work was fulfilling because it grew directly from my own experiences. I could speak authentically about the ways people can be manipulated by family members, about the difference between helping and enabling, about the importance of maintaining financial boundaries even with people you love. I could share practical strategies for protecting yourself without sounding like someone who had never faced these challenges personally. The women who attended my workshops often approached me afterward with their own stories. Daughters who called only when they needed money, sons who had moved back home and refused to contribute to household expenses, grandchildren whose parents used them as emotional leverage to extract financial support from grandparents. The patterns were depressingly familiar, but so was the relief these women expressed at hearing someone else articulate what they had been experiencing. I thought I was being a bad mother for getting tired of always being asked for money, one woman told me after a workshop in Queens. I thought love meant never saying no to your children, no matter how old they were or how often they asked. Love does mean not wanting to watch people you care about struggle unnecessarily, I told her. But it also means not preventing them from learning the skills they need to handle their own lives. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the natural consequences of their choices. On Thanksgiving, a holiday that had been fraught with disappointment for several years, I hosted a potluck dinner for the friends I had made through various activities. 12 women between the ages of 68 and 79 gathered in my apartment, each bringing a dish and stories and laughter that filled the space with warmth. We went around the table sharing what we were grateful for, and when my turn came, I surprised myself with what came out of my mouth. "I'm grateful for the lottery," I said, "but not for the reason you might think. I'm not grateful for the money, although financial security is certainly nice. I'm grateful because winning the lottery forced me to see clearly how some of my relationships actually worked. It showed me the difference between people who love me and people who love what I can do for them, and that knowledge, painful as it was to acquire, has allowed me to build better relationships going forward." One of the women, a former social worker named Ruth, nodded knowingly. Sometimes God gives us exactly what we need to learn the lessons we couldn't learn any other way, even when the lessons are painful. After everyone left that evening, I cleaned up the dishes while jazz music played softly in the background. The apartment was quiet, but not lonely. There's a difference between being alone and being isolated, between solitude and abandonment. I was alone by choice, surrounded by evidence of friendship and support, confident that if I needed help or company, I could reach out to people who would respond with genuine care. I thought about the Thanksgivings of previous years, the unanswered invitations, the meals eaten alone while hoping Jessica might call, the desperate attempts to maintain connection with someone who had already emotionally left the relationship. This Thanksgiving had been everything those previous ones hadn't. Warm, reciprocal, filled with people who were genuinely happy to spend time with me. As winter settled over the city again, I reflected on the extraordinary changes the past 2 years had brought. I had lost a relationship I thought was the most important one in my life, but I had gained a dozen relationships that were healthier and more fulfilling. I had stopped defining myself primarily as Jessica's mother, and started discovering who Margaret was as an individual person. The lottery money had certainly made practical differences in my life: better housing, financial security, the freedom to pursue interests without worrying about the cost. But the real jackpot had been learning to value myself enough to demand basic respect from the people in my life. I had stopped waiting for love from someone who had forgotten how to give it, and started accepting love from people who offered it freely. I had stopped trying to earn affection through constant sacrifice, and started building relationships based on mutual interest and genuine care. On New Year's Eve, Sarah and I attended a party at the senior center, where I had been volunteering. As midnight approached and everyone prepared to make resolutions for the coming year, I realized I didn't need to resolve to change anything dramatic about my life. For the first time in decades, I was living a life that felt authentic and sustainable and joyful. But I did make one resolution: to continue trusting my instincts about relationships, to continue choosing people who saw value in me as a person rather than just what I could provide for them, and to continue building a life rich with genuine connection rather than toxic obligation. As the countdown to midnight began, I found myself thinking not about what I had lost, but about what I had gained. I had gained the knowledge that I could survive the loss of a relationship that had defined me for 35 years. I had gained friends who appreciated my company, work that used my experiences to help other people, Time to pursue interests that brought me pleasure. I had gained the understanding that love without respect is just manipulation, that family titles don't automatically create loving relationships, and that sometimes the people who claim to care about you the most are the ones who treat you the worst. Most importantly, I had gained myself back. The woman I had been before I devoted my entire identity to being Jessica's mother. The woman who had interests and opinions and value that existed independently of her usefulness to other people. When the ball dropped and everyone cheered and exchanged hugs, I felt genuinely hopeful about the future for the first time in years. Not because I expected perfect circumstances or relationships without complications, but because I had learned to create happiness from my own choices rather than waiting for other people to provide it for me. 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, I was tending the small garden I had planted on my fire escape when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, and I almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity maybe, or just the beautiful morning putting me in a generous mood, made me pick up. "Hello? Mom? It's me." Jessica's voice, tentative in a way I hadn't heard in years. My heart did its automatic flutter, but this time the feeling was manageable rather than overwhelming. "Hello, Jessica. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I know it's been a long time. Almost 2 years," I said quietly. I know it's been too long. Mom, I've been in therapy for about a year now, and I'm starting to understand some things about how I treated you, about how I treated our relationship." I waited, not rushing to fill the silence, not automatically reassuring her or making the conversation easier like I would have in the past. "I'm calling to apologize, not because I want something, not because I'm in crisis, but because I owe you an apology that's about 15 years overdue. You were right about everything. I did take you for granted. I did treat you like an ATM more than like a person. I did only call when I needed something. And the newspaper article, God, Mom, the newspaper article was so cruel and unfair. I was angry and humiliated, and I wanted to hurt you the way I felt hurt. But that's no excuse. You didn't deserve any of that." I sat down heavily in my favorite chair, surprised by how much I had needed to hear those words, even after all this time of building a life that didn't depend on Jessica's validation. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "It means more than you know. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me again. I know I burned a lot of bridges, and I know trust has to be earned back slowly, if at all. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand what I did wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry." "What changed?" I asked. "What made you decide to go to therapy?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful rather than defensive. "Honestly, losing you was the wake-up call I needed. When David left, I expected you to rescue me like you always had before. When you didn't, I was furious. I felt abandoned and betrayed. But then I had to actually handle my problems myself for the first time in my adult life. And you know what? I figured it out. I found resources, I made connections with people who could help me, I developed coping skills I didn't know I had, and slowly I started to realize that you hadn't abandoned me. You had stopped enabling me. There's a difference." She paused, then continued. "In therapy, I started to see how I had turned you into a function rather than treating you like a person. I started to understand that I had trained myself to see you as someone who existed to solve my problems rather than as someone who had her own life and needs and feelings. And I started to understand how incredibly selfish and cruel that was. It was painful," I admitted, "but it was also necessary. For both of us, it turns out. I want you to know that I'm different now. Not perfect, but different. I'm in a good place financially. I got a better job after the divorce, and I'm living within my means instead of constantly juggling debt. I'm dating someone new, but I'm taking it slowly and making sure I can be a good partner instead of just looking for someone to take care of me. I've been volunteering at a literacy program. Actually, I think it might be the same one where you volunteer, now that I think about it. The literacy program at the library. I had been there for 2 years, and in recent months, a new volunteer had joined the program, a woman in her 30s who seemed dedicated and thoughtful in her work with the adult learners. I had noticed her because she reminded me of someone, but I hadn't been able to place who. Jessica, I said slowly, are you the volunteer who's been working with Miguel on his citizenship test prep? You know about Miguel? She sounded surprised. I'm the volunteer who's been working with his wife, Elena, on her English conversation skills. We've been coordinating our efforts to help them both prepare for the citizenship ceremony next month. A pause. Then Jessica laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years that wasn't tinged with stress or manipulation. We've been working together for months without knowing it. That's either the strangest coincidence in the world, or the universe has a sense of humor. Maybe a little of both. We talked for another few minutes about the literacy program, about Miguel and Elena, and their inspiring determination to become citizens, about the rewarding challenge of helping people achieve goals that would change their lives. It was the first conversation we had had in years that wasn't about crisis or conflict, money or manipulation. It was just two people sharing something they both cared about. Mom, Jessica said as the conversation began to wind down, I don't know if this is something you'd be open to, but would you maybe like to meet for coffee sometime? Just coffee, just talking. No agenda, no requests, no drama. Just getting to know each other again, if that's possible. I thought about it. The old Margaret would have said yes immediately, grateful for any attention, any chance to rebuild the relationship regardless of whether Jessica had actually changed or was just saying the right words. But I was no longer the old Margaret, and I had learned to trust my instincts rather than my desperate hopes. I'd be willing to try coffee, I said carefully, but I need you to understand that things are different now. I have a life that works for me, relationships that nourish me, work that fulfills me. I'm not waiting around for someone to rescue from their latest crisis. I'm not available to be anyone's emergency financial backup. If we're going to have a relationship, it has to be between two adults who respect each other, not between a parent and a dependent child. I understand, Jessica said, and honestly, that's the kind of relationship I want too. I'm tired of being the person who only calls when I need something. I want to be someone who calls because I'm genuinely interested in how you're doing, because I miss talking to you, because I care about your life for its own sake. Then let's try coffee, I said, but slowly. And if either of us feels like we're falling back into old patterns, we need to be honest about that. Deal. We made plans to meet the following Saturday at a small cafe near the library where we both volunteered. As I hung up the phone, I felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in years about the possibility of having a healthy relationship with my daughter. But I also felt proud that I had learned to approach that possibility from a position of strength rather than desperation. I was no longer willing to accept crumbs of attention or affection. I was no longer willing to enable destructive behavior out of fear of abandonment. I was no longer willing to define my worth by someone else's treatment of me. If Jessica had genuinely changed, if she was ready to have an adult relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care, then maybe we could build something new together, something healthier than what we had lost. And if she hadn't really changed, if this was just a more sophisticated form of manipulation, I would be able to recognize that and protect myself accordingly. Because I had learned the most valuable lesson of my life, that loving someone doesn't require losing yourself, that being a mother doesn't mean being a doormat, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive patterns. The coffee meeting went well. Jessica looked older, more settled, less frantic than she had in our last few encounters years earlier. We talked about safe topics, the literacy program, books we had been reading, changes in the neighborhood around the library. She asked genuine questions about my life and listened to the answers without immediately steering the conversation back to herself. When I mentioned my painting classes, she asked to see photos of my work on my phone. When I talked about my trip to Italy with Sarah, she wanted to hear about the cooking classes and the art museums. When I described my financial literacy workshops, she listened with what seemed like genuine interest and pride. I had no idea you were doing all these things, she said. You sound happy. Really happy. More than I remember you being in a long time. I am happy, I said, surprised by how true that statement was. I'm busier than I've been in years. But it's good busy with things I choose rather than things I feel obligated to do. I'm glad, Jessica said, and she sounded like she meant it. You deserve that. You deserve to have a life that makes you happy. We met for coffee 3 more times over the following months. Each conversation was easier than the last, more natural, less careful. Jessica told me about her work, her volunteer activities, the man she was dating. I told her about my friends, my travels, my various projects. She never asked for money. She never mentioned financial difficulties or emergencies that required my intervention. She never tried to guilt me about the years we had been estranged or pressure me to move faster in rebuilding our relationship. Most remarkably, she started calling occasionally just to check in. Short conversations with no agenda beyond seeing how I was doing. She remembered details from previous conversations and asked follow-up questions. She sent me articles about topics she thought might interest me. She invited me to a reading by an author whose work we had discussed. Slowly, carefully, we began to build something that felt like a genuine relationship between 2 adults who had chosen to care about each other. But I remained cautious. I had been fooled before by Jessica's ability to perform the behaviors of a loving daughter when it served her purposes. I had learned not to mistake temporary good behavior for permanent change. So I appreciated the progress we were making while protecting myself from assuming it was permanent or unconditional. The test came 8 months after we had reconnected. Jessica called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and something in her voice immediately triggered my old alarm bells. Mom, I need to talk to you about something, and I need you to know up front that this isn't what it sounds like. My stomach clenched. Here it comes, I thought. The crisis, the emergency, the reason she had been cultivating this relationship for the past 8 months. What's wrong? I asked. Nothing's wrong exactly, but I've been offered an incredible job opportunity. A nonprofit in Portland has offered me a position as their development director. It's everything I've ever wanted professionally. Meaningful work, good salary, real opportunity for advancement. But I would have to move to Oregon, and the position starts in 6 weeks. I waited for the request. Money for moving expenses, surely. A loan to cover the security deposit on a new apartment. Help with the costs of relocating across the country. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity, I said carefully. It is. But, Mom, the reason I'm calling is that I wanted to tell you about it before I make my final decision, because it would mean living 3,000 miles away from you. And after we just started rebuilding our relationship, I don't want you to feel like I'm abandoning you again. I was quiet for a moment, absorbing what she was actually saying. This wasn't a request for money or help. This was someone seeking advice from a person she cared about, someone considering how her decisions might affect our relationship. Jessica, I said slowly, are you asking for my permission to take this job? Not permission exactly, but your opinion, I guess. Your honest opinion about whether you think I should move across the country just when we're starting to be close again. For the first time in our adult relationship, Jessica was asking me for advice about her life, rather than asking me to solve her problems. She was treating me like someone whose opinion mattered, someone whose feelings were worth considering in her decision-making process. I think you should take the job, I said without hesitation. Really? Really? It sounds perfect for you professionally, and you're 37 years old. This is exactly the time in your life when you should be taking career risks and pursuing opportunities that excite you. Geographic distance doesn't have to mean emotional distance anymore, especially with technology. We can video chat, we can email, we can visit each other. If our relationship is healthy now, it will survive a move to Portland. But what if being far away makes us drift apart again? Then that will tell us something about the relationship, but I don't think it will. Because what we have now is different from what we had before. Before, our relationship was based on dependency. You needed things from me, so you stayed in contact. Now our relationship is based on choice. We genuinely enjoy each other's company and care about each other's lives. That kind of relationship can survive distance. Jessica was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for believing that I've changed enough that our relationship can survive this. That means everything to me. You have changed, Jessica, and so have I. We're both different people than we were 3 years ago, and the relationship we're building now is different too. healthier, more honest, based on who we actually are instead of who we wish the other person was. Jessica took the job in Portland. She moved in September, and I flew out to help her unpack her apartment, the first time I had visited her living space in over 5 years. Her new apartment was modest but charming, and she had filled it with books and plants and artwork that reflected her actual interests rather than what she thought would impress other people. We spent a long weekend together, exploring the city, walking through Powell's books, visiting art galleries and farmers markets. It was the most relaxed time we had spent together since she was in college. There was no underlying tension, no feeling that one of us was performing for the other, no sense that this visit was a prelude to some kind of request or manipulation. On my last evening there, as we were having dinner at a restaurant near her apartment, Jessica brought up something that had been weighing on her mind. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about the years when our relationship was so bad, and I keep wondering why it took losing you completely for me to understand what I was doing wrong. Why couldn't I see it while it was happening?" I thought about my answer carefully. This wasn't a conversation I wanted to rush through or oversimplify. "I think it's hard to see patterns when you're inside them," I said finally. "For 30 years, I trained you to believe that my love was unconditional and inexhaustible, that I would always be available to solve your problems no matter how you treated me. You learned to take that for granted because it was always true. It wasn't until I changed the rules, until I stopped being available for rescue, that you had to confront what our relationship actually looked like." "But didn't you ever try to tell me I was taking advantage of you?" "Not directly. I was afraid that if I criticized your behavior, you would stop speaking to me entirely. So I enabled the pattern while resenting it, which was unfair to both of us. I should have set boundaries much earlier, when you first started treating me like an ATM instead of a person. Why didn't you?" It was a question I had spent a lot of time in therapy exploring myself, because I confused loving you with needing to be needed by you, because I thought my value as a mother depended on how indispensable I was to your life, because I was afraid that if I stopped solving your problems, you wouldn't have any reason to stay in relationship with me. "That's so sad," Jessica said quietly. It was sad, but it was also a choice I kept making over and over again. I could have changed the dynamic at any point by refusing to enable it. I just wasn't brave enough until I literally had no other choice. "I'm sorry I put you in that position. I'm sorry I made you feel like your only value was what you could give me. I'm sorry I taught you that was an acceptable way to treat people. Children learn about relationships from their parents. If I had modeled healthier boundaries, you might have learned to respect them earlier." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both of us processing the honesty of the conversation. "I like who we are now," Jessica said finally. "I like who you are when you're not constantly worried about whether I need something. I like who I am when I'm not constantly thinking about what I can get from other people. This feels more real than anything we had before." "I like who we are now, too," I agreed. It took losing each other to find each other, but maybe that was necessary. Maybe we both needed to prove to ourselves that we could be okay alone before we could be good together. Jessica moved to Portland in September. It's been 18 months now, and our relationship continues to evolve in positive directions. We talk on the phone every few weeks, not because either of us is in crisis, but because we genuinely enjoy each other's company. We email articles and photos and updates about our daily lives. I visited her again last spring, and she came home to New York for Christmas. The relationship we have now isn't the one I dreamed of when she was young. It's not intense or emotionally dependent or central to both our daily lives. But it's honest and respectful and genuinely affectionate. We care about each other as individual people rather than as functions in each other's lives. More importantly, I've learned that I can be happy whether our relationship continues to thrive or not. I love Jessica, and I'm grateful for the progress we've made, but my contentment and sense of purpose no longer depend on her approval or attention. I've built a life rich with friendship, meaningful work, creative pursuits, and adventures that I enjoy for their own sake. Now, at 75, I wake up each morning in my sunlit apartment overlooking the Hudson River, and I feel genuinely excited about the day ahead. I have lunch plans with Sarah, a painting class this afternoon, dinner with my book club tonight. Tomorrow I'm volunteering at the literacy program, and this weekend I'm taking a day trip to visit orchards upstate with my walking group. I think about the woman I was 3 years ago, isolated, anxious, defining her worth by how much she could sacrifice for someone who had forgotten how to appreciate sacrifice. I think about the nights I spent staring at my phone, hoping for a call that never came. The holidays spent alone while making excuses for someone who couldn't be bothered to acknowledge them. That woman was living in prison, a prison built from fear of abandonment, fear of setting boundaries, fear of demanding basic respect from people she loved. It was a prison where the bars were made of guilt and obligation, and the desperate hope that if she just gave enough, sacrificed enough, loved enough without condition, someone would finally love her back the same way. The lottery money didn't free me from that prison. It just revealed how strong the bars really were. When I suddenly had something valuable that people wanted, the true nature of my relationships became impossible to ignore. I saw clearly who loved me and who loved what I could provide for them. That clarity was painful but ultimately liberating. It forced me to stop living in fantasy and start dealing with reality. It forced me to stop waiting for other people to define my worth and start defining it myself. Today, my life is full of people who see value in my existence beyond my utility to them. Sarah listens to my concerns and shares her own, not because either of us needs rescue, but because we genuinely care about each other's well-being. My walking group friends remember details about my life and ask follow-up questions because they find me interesting as a person. The people in my painting class appreciate my perspective and sense of humor, not because I'm useful to them, but because they enjoy my company. These relationships have taught me what love actually looks like when it's healthy. Mutual interest, reciprocal care, respect for boundaries, appreciation for each other's individual lives and perspectives. Love, I've learned, isn't about how much you're willing to sacrifice for someone. It's about how much you value each other's happiness, including your own. The greatest gift the lottery gave me wasn't $22 million. It was the opportunity to discover that I could rebuild my entire life at 73 years old. That it's never too late to learn what you deserve. Never too late to demand basic respect. Never too late to stop settling for relationships that diminish rather than enhance your life. If you're listening to this and recognizing patterns in your own relationships, adult children who only call when they need something, family members who treat you like a resource rather than a person, people who mistake your kindness for weakness and your love for an inexhaustible well they can draw from without ever giving back. I want you to know that change is possible at any age. You don't need to win the lottery to free yourself from relationships based on exploitation rather than love. You just need to be brave enough to set boundaries, strong enough to stick to them, and wise enough to recognize that losing people who don't really value you isn't actually a loss. It's liberation. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you can provide. You deserve relationships where care flows both directions, where your needs matter as much as anyone else's, where showing up is mutual and respect is assumed rather than optional. You deserve to wake up excited about your day rather than anxious about who might need something from you. You deserve to spend your time and energy on activities that fulfill you rather than people who drain you. You deserve to know that your worth isn't measured by how much you're willing to sacrifice for others, but by the simple fact that you exist and have value as a human being. The relationship I have with Jessica now isn't perfect, but it's honest. It's based on choice rather than obligation, on mutual respect rather than one-sided dependence. Whether it continues to grow or eventually fades, I know I'll be okay either way, because I've learned to build happiness from my own choices rather than waiting for other people to provide it. That's the real jackpot. Discovering that you're enough, just as you are, to create a life worth living. Have you ever lived something like this story? Or known someone who has struggled with the kind of family dynamics I've described? Tell me about it in the comments below. If this story touched something in you, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel. It truly helps these stories reach people who might need to hear them, and it helps me keep opening my heart to share these experiences with you. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive patterns. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is remember that love without respect isn't love at all. It's just a beautiful name for exploitation. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you're never too old to start over, and it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve.